Depending where you're at today, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Lizerbraum. I'm a pre-sales solutions architect here at Managed Solution. Welcome to the third of 3 webinars in our series of the future of AI-driven cybersecurity. Now today is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024, and I'm going to be joined today with Matt Giancola, one of our systems engineers who is phenomenal at understanding and deploying Microsoft security products such as Defender. So there's going to be a lot to cover with him. So stay tuned. There's going to be a ton of information in this webinar. Now, what's really cool is that this is going right into October. It's October. I can't believe how fast this year is going. So it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So hopefully you're going to take away a lot of information on how you can protect your organization, or maybe find out what's missing that you might not even be using. Now, what's even cooler is that it is Wave 2 of Copilot that just got released in the last week. So there's a lot of nuances with Wave 2 of Copilot to look forward to as well. And that's kind of why I'm wearing my Hawaiian shirt today. You know, stick with the theme, little waves, a little surfing action there. So let's get right into it. So for today's agenda, I'm going to be covering a recap of what we talked about in our last webinars real quick, just to get you up to speed. And then we're going to dive right in. Matt and I are going to talk about proven strategies with Defender, with a little twist of AI in there. We're also going to talk about unlocking any of those hidden values that you might not be aware of. You might already have some tools at your disposal that you're just not using yet. Let's find out. And I'm going to give you a nice rundown of Copilot for Security. It's an amazing tool to be able to automate, and not only automate, but really accelerate your ability to prevent threats and detect threats and provide reporting. So we're going to look at all of those automation types of areas with Copilot for Security. Again, this whole webinar will have some demonstrations and dashboards throughout. During the webinar, because we're on Zoom, feel free to hit that Q&A button. We're here live. We're going to be responding to questions live, so feel free, if you have a question, type it out. We'll type out a response. And towards the end, if you feel like you want to voice your question, just raise your hand and we can take you off of mute and answer the questions after the webinar is towards the end of that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about cybersecurity a little bit further. Now, I don't want to surprise anyone, but we have a quiz right now. I'm going to be launching a quiz. Don't worry, it doesn't count towards any grades or anything that you might be undergoing, but go ahead and take that quiz. As you're taking the quiz, I'm going to be doing a quick recap of what we covered in our last webinar. So good luck. And by the way, we're going to be covering those answers shortly afterwards. Now, to recap what we talked about in our first 2 webinars, the first thing was that we had Lloyd Bowen, we had Sean Farrell, our owner. Lloyd is our VCIO and Security and Compliance Officer here at Managed Solution. It was a really good experience. If you want to capture that, go ahead. You can get that QR code or that shortened URL to get right to the YouTube video for that. What we covered in that webinar was really overall the types of cybersecurity risks that are out there. We also covered the various vectors of cybersecurity risks that are out there today in 2024, 2025, and beyond. And Lloyd walked us through the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which was really informative in how we should really prepare for cybersecurity and protect our environment and our data first before we even think about planning out other strategies. So really good detail in that webinar. Highly suggest you go and visit that. We also talked about just the climbing increase in costs with trying to maintain cybersecurity requirements. There's a lot of insurance providers among us, and it becomes a lot more expensive in 2024, 2025, and beyond. And our goal, we don't want to make it more expensive. We want you to have the proper tools to be able to cover your organization to prevent any of those added costs that might be due to insurance requirements, or that might even be due to some of the threats that might impact your business. Also in that webinar, I covered Copilot for Security for the day in the life of a chief information security officer who might be needing to evaluate some reports. And I walk through some of the prompting that that officer can do in order to get some great detail out of Defender, Sentinel, whatever those tool sets that you might be using in your organization. And finally, I went through some of the ways that you submit the prompt and really what Copilot for Security does in the back end, from orchestration to building the context to using plugins, responding, and then providing that response in natural language. And in the second webinar, William Ford was with me. William is an extraordinaire in terms of security with networking, particularly Fortinet, and also a product called Port Knox, which really gives you some advanced coverage inside and outside of your network. So strongly encourage you to take this QR code, take a look at that URL to go to that YouTube video to catch up on things, because William had a lot of information to cover, which was really informative. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about Microsoft's best kept security secrets to help us understand what's out there. How can we protect ourselves? There is a lot of information, and I have some of the experts in our field to talk about it. So with that said, I'd like to introduce you to Matt Giancola, one of our systems engineers who really on a day-to-day basis works with our customers through lots of areas within the Microsoft world, including Microsoft security components. And Matt, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. I've been with Managed Solution for a little bit over a year here. I joined the professional services team last year, and I've been, working with the team to deliver a lot of these Microsoft security solutions. In the meantime, before that, I have got a long career delivering Microsoft solutions, 18 years in the managed services industry. So, I've been there along a lot of iterations of these Microsoft security products and been working with them for years.
Awesome. So good to have you on. I think a lot of this is going to be discussing, a lot of the things that you see in your world as you're kind of working with our customers and really how the landscape has changed throughout those years.
Mm-hmm.
But first, so we just launched a quiz, and what I'd like to do, we're gonna discuss that first answer and see what that's all about. So
All right.
let me get to that. All right. So the first quiz that popped up with everyone, and we were reviewing the answers. But true or false? Security is the opposite of productivity, and we'll just give you the answer right now. The answer is false. Now, why is that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's probably a lot of end users out there who would argue the question here because, a lot of people do feel that any kind of like increased security may impact their productivity. So there's always been this kind of balance, and there's always been kind of this fight between the two, right? We try to keep the networks and the environments as secure as possible. Sometimes that means changing your productivity routines. So some people can kind of get the wrong feel of it, but that's where adoption really comes in. Part of our delivery process with these projects is kind of coaching our customer resources, how to kind of roll out the information, how to best present it to the end users so that they can feel that all this stuff is not just kind of being thrown on them to, make their job impossible, which many people probably feel that way. So adoption is key, communication with the staff, very, very, very key in all of these kind of deployments.
Yeah. All right, so another quiz that was popped up in the webinar here was, all attacks can be prevented. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Of course not, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, here's a little, argument for why it's false, is that we always have to assume compromise. right? We always have to make sure that we're practicing a good prevention, detection, response, and recovery. And um, in your world, especially like when you're introducing Microsoft concepts and into a customer, a lot of it might have to do with things like conditional based access, right? Um,
Yes.
is that something that can help prevent attacks?
Of course, it's probably the number one recommendation we make to our customers who do not already have conditional access in place. As far as zero trust, I think this is part of that first kind of step in the zero trust principles is identifying the users and endpoints that are trying to connect into the system and verifying those, and that's where the conditional access kind of comes in. You can set these policies to evaluate the user identities and the devices and make sure that they're meeting certain criteria before they can even gain access into the 365 services.
So the next one is kind of interesting here. You know, I would think having a good network security perimeter will keep attackers out, right? What do you think?
Well, I mean, hopefully in a perfect world, but you can't mitigate 100% of the risk, unfortunately.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, a lot of the things here that Microsoft especially recommends is having a really good access control plan, implementing you know security operations. That means you might want to look at the licensing that you already own because it might already have a lot of things related to providing good security for, say, like, email security or device security or things like that. But we're also going to talk about some things like insider threat management and things that we can do there. Awesome. Let's see what the next question is here. So, all right. Well, the other question is long and complex passwords are strong enough. I don't know. I mean, long and complex passwords in my mind are like better than what you see here with putting a sticky note on a desktop. I mean,
Certainly better than that.
yeah, but there's other
Yeah.
things, right? So I'm gonna say false on this because I think what we need to do is other things besides just long and complex passwords, right?
hmm Goes back to the
Talk-
conditional access conversation
yeah,
a couple questions ago. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Tell me a little bit about like MFA, user risk, sign-in risk behaviors.
Yeah, sure. So with conditional access, back to the password question for 1 second too. Sure, you can set up a 50 character long password, and that's all well and fine. And we should be doing complex passwords for all users in the organization, of course. But that's not enough because if you get, it's the long password can still be compromised. So that's where the conditional access comes in, and which we were discussing a little earlier. You can set certain parameters that Entra ID is kind of looking for with the devices and the identities that are trying to connect into the network. So you can set criteria around, like Jeff was saying, they have some evaluation that will evaluate user risk and sign-in risks, and they're always monitoring anomalies with sign-in locations or any kind of strange behavior that may kick off some kind of flag. So you can also set other things like the device has to be at a certain OS level. Tons of parameters that you can really configure within the conditional access to secure the resources behind it. So it's like, again, it's a very, very key tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the user risk and sign-in risk behaviors are now uh, getting even stronger, with AI, being used a little bit more and more to be able to detect those anomalies. So it's a good thing. All right,
Yep.
let's talk about this. So from the quiz that came up with IT admin accounts are safe, right? What are your thoughts on that? I'd say probably false. And the answer is, you know what?
Unfortunately, no again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, here's one thing that I see too frequently is that there are global admins galore in organizations. And it always scares me when there's a lot of accounts that are elevated with global admin privileges. So, probably a better way is to look at like, just enough access, just in time access, using some of the governance. Um, is there anything you want to touch on in terms of securing IT admin accounts a little bit better?
Yeah, sure. So with the just-in-time access, translating that to Microsoft language, that typically falls under the privileged identity management
Hmm.
product, I believe, right? So that's a PIM for short. That's what Entra uses to secure these accounts. Basically, somebody does have to administer it, but basically there are, you know, parameters around access accounts. So they can be enabled for just a certain amount of time. So then automatically the admin privileges will be removed from the account so that you don't forget to remove those. And next thing you know, you have 15 global administrators in the tenant. So it's really kind of to keep those elevated admin permissions used only when they're needed to be used to keep the environment more safe. Again, because if anybody gets a hold of one of the IT admin accounts with elevated privileges, that's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be just global admin. I mean, there's a lot of different roles that have elevation. There's user administrators, SharePoint administrators, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there could be a program initiated to allow users to be able to request privileged accounts in certain roles. You know, the administrator would then give them an approval of some kind, and
Mm-hmm.
then give them a time-based allowance to be able to do their job. And then let's say they walk away in the middle of it, it'll close down after whatever that time lapse is. So always a good thing to practice with that. This one was covered actually with Will at our last call in our last webinar, where endpoint detection and response, things that come with advanced endpoint features, it really is not a true replacement of antivirus. And so the answer to this is false, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I
and
figured.
and and the reason why is because AV software is kind of its own little category, right? So AV software that's running on, say, like a Windows device, probably running Defender
Yep.
antivirus. That's always the front line that you want to have on that machine. And then, you know, endpoint detection and response is going to show you some other behaviors where it's going to provide, some different rules, different parameters, maybe even some different automations to kind of lower that threat within the organization.
Yeah, right. I think there are some of the AI features being integrated into that too. So a lot of the the analytics and the log collection and all of that stuff is kind of going on behind the scenes too. So it's really more of an analytical thing, I think, looking out for risks.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
again,
Oh, go
yeah, like you
ahead.
said, you still need to have a strong antivirus on your endpoints, of course, too. So
Yeah,
Microsoft Defender integrates again with all of these other products that we're talking about too. So a lot of people choose to go that route.
yeah. And actually, we're going to show you very shortly the endpoint detection areas within the Defender portal and how it actually interacts with Copilot. So I'm going to show you a dashboard on that, and we can kind of walk through some areas there. Software as a service or plugins and things like that. And, there's a lot of them out there. It's still in use quite a bit. Say you have Outlook plugins that do
Yep.
certain things, or you might be leveraging, say, like some type of integrated single sign-on of an application. And for the most part, these are pretty, large organizations. They're vetted, but I don't know. I'd still say false on this. You can't trust them all, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. So the key feature here is just make sure that supply chain security is validated. It's always good to research the vendor. Who are they? What have they done in terms of securing their products? If it's open source, of course, you really have to be careful because
Yep.
open source, quite often, there's a lot of things on GitHub, for example, that you can pull from, and it has it been vetted? Of course not. So
Right.
it really takes that level of responsibility there. All right. Well, I mean, shifting our attention over to something like Microsoft Defender, it's changed quite dramatically in the last year or so, I'd say. There's a lot more integration with it. This was shown in our last webinar real briefly, but I did want to point out again how effective it is to just to have everything in one centralized area where you can see a lot of Defender entitlements you might have. So if you are subscribed to, say, like a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license, say you're an organization, 300 users or under, and you're leveraging the Microsoft Business Premium. Well, with that comes Defender for Business, and with that comes some areas like there's a few things like endpoint protection. So on the left side here, you might have access to things like endpoint areas here.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about before, actually. If you want to click on policies and rules at the bottom of the email and collaboration there. Yeah, let's click on threat policies and just kind of walk through this real quick, I think. So under policies there, these are the 5 areas that we were chatting about a couple questions ago before too. So we talked about the anti-phishing, the anti-spam, anti-malware. I don't think we touched on the safe attachments and safe links, and this is also part of the Defender for 365. Safe attachments, when turns on, will monitor and scan all attachments that come in on emails and even attachments shared through Teams and SharePoint. And safe links also will analyze and look at the links that come in through emails and shared documents as well too. So those are good, basic things to have turned on in your tenant, to be kind of monitoring those specific things. Just that alone, and combined with the anti-phishing, can mitigate a lot of those phishing and impersonation type attacks.
So if a customer hasn't really implemented these solutions yet, what is the impact when you do implement it? Is there any, going back to like the productivity question, is there any issues when you turn these things on? And does it affect anything in terms of productivity?
So typically when we're moving a customer, say from a third party spam service into the Defender service, we typically like to tell them that there's, say, a 30 to 60 day kind of burn-in period where the product has to learn. Sometimes we'll kind of license the Defender ahead of time and let it kind of process the email, maybe not with any policies turned on to do anything, to kind of just learn the types of emails that are coming in. But when we move people over into this, there could be things like, say, maybe some things that the end user had whitelisted or blacklisted. We don't necessarily completely bring over the whole whitelist and blacklist. So there's little things like maybe some emails that you were receiving before aren't coming through, and those maybe need to get addressed on the admin side to make sure that those to address the issue of why those aren't coming in. So we try to let the customers know that probably for 30 to 60 days after we implement this, there's going to be that a little bit of a learning curve, and we're going to have to probably respond to some customer events. But typically it's the smaller stuff there. Nothing really major. I don't think that would be a productivity killer to many people.
Yeah. Here's one kind of decision point that people might argue about in the IT world: to quarantine or not to quarantine. And what I mean by that is it better just to send, bad email or junk email straight to the junk folder for the user, or enabling, say, like a quarantine? Is that a better solution? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. We typically work with the customer. If the customer does have their own IT staff, we'll typically talk to them, have some conversations around that. To see, what we want, what settings what may work best for them. Yeah, totally. So we try to work with the customer, like I was saying, to understand, what the needs are within the organization. The good thing about Defender is that you can set different parameters. If for this, type of email, the customer may just want to quarantine that. For some others, they may want to block it outright, right at the Defender side, so that the end user doesn't even see it. So there's a number of kind of customizations you can do there. You can kind of pick and choose what you want to do with different email types within there.
Another key integration piece with Defender is no matter what you're leveraging with Microsoft Defender, you're going to have some visibility into certain things, certain investigations. And in particular, let's take a look, for example, at some incidents that might have come through that we might want to look at. This first in the list here, I wanted to actually demonstrate the effectiveness of being able to look at certain areas that have been manipulated in our environment or has attempted to be manipulated. And one of the key things here is that we've got Copilot now. So Copilot for security is not only it's a security operations chat bot. That's really how it shows up as itself, but it also integrates itself into things like Defender now. So what's nice about it, and this was a little bit of the demonstration from our last webinar, but it really helps understand and it puts it into plain language that we can share to executives in our organization. Also, this is an example here where users that may have been impacted by some type of manipulation, we can detect who it is, and then it gives us advice on what type of messaging to send to that user to give them a little bit more education, right? So it kind of goes along with that simulation attack, and this goes a little bit more of a step further in kind of drafting some communications for us.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that, the AI integrated within a lot of these settings within here too. And I think that's the great hope of the AI when it comes to security, is that with the speed of it, it can really maybe give a leg up on trying to prevent some of these attacks. And even if there is an attack like what you were just describing there, mitigating it, contacting the user immediately, taking automated action, maybe disabling the account. These are all things that people are really excited about out there. They think that, AI can really do all these things quickly, and that's what we're kind of hoping.
And one thing that's very familiar and very kind of near and dear to all of our Microsoft hearts is Secure Score. Can you tell me a little bit about it? Have you played around with Secure Score or helped customers with maybe strengthening this score here? And actually, even to take a step back, what is Secure Score?
So Secure Score evaluates, it's built into any tenant that has at least a basic license. So it's analyzing your tenant, we're analyzing all the products in the suite, looking for things that you may have missed to set up that could secure the tenant better. So usually this is if a customer is coming to us and asking, hey, what can we do to improve the security of our Microsoft 365 tenant? This is the first place we'll probably go to pull this report and export it and take a look at it. Because this is the first place where you can tell things like, is MFA enabled, like the basics. You want to check the basics first. And the basic conditional access, MFA, password policies, all those basic things do help to increase the score. So it is one of the first places we look. It's probably not going to tell you every single thing about your tenant, but it's a really good place to start. And we always pretty much do start there with most security kind of reviews.
What I find interesting is that when you look at this, one of the things you can see here is a little graphical area called comparison, and it shows your score compared to other organizations of a similar size. And I always kind of find it interesting to see kind of like, well, where do I sit in that aspect of it? Not sure how scientific that is, but it does compare, I guess, of organizations that have similar size seats and maybe even similar licensing types to see, how that compares.
Just one thing really is somebody may like see it and be like, oh, it's just a secure score. It's just some banner that's up there in the portal. But it is actually important because it can, like we were saying, it can show you the main holes you have in the security of your tenant. So
absolutely.
It's a good place to start. Some people kind of, laugh it off or be like, oh, it's just some banner in the portal. What is it? What does that mean? But it's one of the things that really is important.
whether we know it or not, there's also on the topic of AI, there's quite a bit of AI that goes into this as well because it's quite interesting how much is built into these metrics here. So when we're looking at things like identity and data and devices and so forth, these are metrics where it's providing intelligence in a very easy to consume way, right in front of our eyes. How are we doing? And to go a step further, what I really love about it is that, let's say I wanted to see my score compared to what could I actually possibly achieve with the licensing that I have, within my tenant. Because I think you've probably run into this where we see customers that have great licensing, like let's say a Microsoft 365 E3 or E5,
Yeah,
and they might
right.
only be taking advantage of just a few of the parameters or few of the functionality. And so I find it always interesting where, this light blue line represents like, you know what? You could do a lot better than that with what you already own.
That's very true. We do see that a lot too, especially with the E5 product, which of course I believe has all of the security features enabled in it too. So, but even with Business Premium, we see that a lot too, and some of
Oh,
the
yeah.
lower license types too, where improvements can easily be made. Sometimes now the things that people don't want to do go back to the fact that they may think it's too much, and it may affect their productivity and things like that. So there's always that kind of balance and tension going on.
That's right. Yeah. So Matt, from a zero trust concept here, in the Microsoft world, a lot of the best known secrets, I think, can be gleaned from this area alone.
Yeah, because we can start with this one, but the next couple slides maybe are a little bit simpler too. We've already touched on a lot of these products. So we see on the left-hand side when we're talking about the endpoint security, again, that goes back to identities, users, and the devices that are connecting into your network. So the first step there in Entra, before any of those endpoints or users can connect to the system, they have to pass through conditional access policies. So that's kind of the first step there. This is just kind of trying to give you an idea of like the kind of flow of the identities and how that works with the conditional access and stuff. But they're also showing you on the right-hand side the type of resources that this can protect too. And there's even some third-party things in there and your typical internal data sources as well. So they're kind of showing you all the things that this can do. Yeah, so here they really have they have the whole Microsoft security stack laid out for us here in this diagram here. So this is the top level product. This is, I believe, the security operations or security ops product that we're talking about here. So up at the top where you see Microsoft Defender XDR, that incorporates a number of the products below: Defender for Endpoint, Defender for 365, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Cloud. I think we've touched on most of those individual products today, but this is kind of showing you how they could be all wrapped together in the flagship security product here. Microsoft Sentinel is also kind of a big piece of this. If you really wanted to bring all your security operations in-house, that's Microsoft SIEM product. So this can, this product as a whole can really do all of that security monitoring that you may have a third-party service for doing. This product can do all of that in one. Sure, yeah, like anything else, like all these other products we've been talking about, Intune integrates directly with all of these products. So if you're currently using Intune to manage your remote devices, or if you're thinking about it, it's what we call part of the modern work experience now with where customers who are looking to move away from any kind of really on-premise resource and go more cloud-based. Intune does all of that for you. And for this conversation, the cool thing about Intune is it integrates directly with some of these products, especially I'd say Defender for Endpoint, especially really is integrated right in kind of directly with the Intune console. So a lot of those settings are directly available to use there. And then you also have some options. You can set compliance policies to make sure that your devices are meeting a certain level of security. And then that can be flagged in a conditional access policy so that machine would be blocked if it doesn't meet the criteria. You can also roll out configuration policies that there's a good number of security settings in there too. And then on top of that, there's also the security baseline features for Windows 10 and 11 that are embedded, I believe, with the Defender for Endpoint, but available within Intune. And that's kind of like just a best practices template from Microsoft about the security settings that should be enabled on endpoints. So we roll that one out pretty much with as part of every Intune project to try to give the customer kind of like a security baseline as part of that. A lot of times we're doing conditional access with Intune kind of at the same time. A lot of times they're part of the same rollout.
Can you tell me a little bit about the differences between a machine that is, let's say, a Windows desktop that is Entra joined versus domain joined? What are the differences there for some of our attendees who kind of struggle to maybe understand the differences there?
Yeah, there's a couple different terms that we should probably familiarize with. The first one is just Entra joined, which means it is really just joined to the cloud service. It has no connection to any on-premise resources whatsoever. It's fully cloud managed. Then there's hybrid joined devices, where you have a 365 presence, most likely emails and maybe documents are handled in the cloud, but you still have some on-premise domain requirements. The customer isn't really fully ready to move to 100% cloud platform. So that gives you the ability to have kind of a hybrid setup where you still have your domain credentials, so you can still connect to domain resources, but you also have a registered device in Entra that some of the policies could be rolled out to as well. So it's a hybrid state kind of thing, and Microsoft eventually probably is looking to move away from that, but the option's still available for those organizations that aren't ready to fully make the full move to the cloud.
Got it. All right. Well, yeah, there's definitely a lot to be leveraged here from an Intune standpoint. Adding on Defender becomes a little bit easy from that aspect after Intune has been deployed, I would say. And then everything else, like you mentioned, it just integrates really well across the board to give you the inside to the outside protections that you really need within the organization. So, you know what? I think what we'll do, I'm going to stop sharing, but, Matt, I just wanted to thank you so much for, coming aboard to this webinar,
Sure.
giving your expertise, your insights, what you see day in, day out. Any last words? And by the way, thank you for matching a Hawaiian shirt day. So,
yeah, absolutely. I guess going back to our original question, I just don't feel like security is something that needs to make people feel discouraged or that they aren't going to be able to complete their job. It's all on us as IT people to really kind of educate and let people know the importance of security. I mean, we see these damaging attacks being reported all over the world. Ransomwares, antivirus, patches, and all these things that are out there, which seem to be constantly getting worse and worse too. So any organization needs to take these things very, very seriously, and you make sure that your security posture is up to date, because there are a lot of bad threats out there.
that is for sure. Well, again, thank you for your insight. And I'm sure we're going to run into you very shortly in future webinars, and as well as our customers. If you're interested in learning more about what Managed Solution can do for your organization to help protect it, just keep in mind, we have people like Matt here who are experts at what they do. So again, appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. Good times.
All right. So as Matt said, there are a lot of malicious attackers out there, bad actors, and that's a given in today's environment. And that's why it's really important to have a tool like Copilot for Security, which I'm going to demonstrate to you next. And let's take a quick look. Now, Copilot for Security from the outside, it doesn't really look like much, does it? But what it is, it's a chat-capable tool of providing cybersecurity incident management very quickly. Now, there's a few different themes that you can set. So if you'd rather have a light theme, a dark theme, high contrast, you can certainly change it to that. But a setting I wanted to pay particularly attention to is the data and privacy. And in this case, it's probably a really good idea for Microsoft to use data gathered to train and improve the accuracy of AI models. I would highly recommend keeping that on because that's what AI is about. In case you need some help in getting started, there's a few featured prompts that are out there, but what we're going to be talking about are prompt books. Prompt books are things that are going to dramatically increase the speed and efficiency of providing vulnerability assessment and management. And prompt books are just like I'm showing you here, where there's a script to analyze and there's a bunch of prompts that go along with it to give it an automated fashion so that you don't have to do each prompt manually or think about it. So let's take an example of a day in the life of a cybersecurity analyst. And maybe it's a junior analyst, and that junior analyst might not have all the complete expertise in order to provide, real deep insights in threat management and protection, and know all of the KQL queries that go along with it. This is a case where, hey, I might have a cybersecurity expert that is giving me some code or scripting in order for me to analyze. So basically, I'm going to take this script and I want to copy and paste it. And this script came from Defender and it looked a little weird. And so we want to make sure, what are we looking at here? How do we analyze it? So I'm going to run through an analysis here. Now, Copilot is going to create a new session, and behind the scenes, Orchestrator is actually doing all the analysis of the script. Now, by doing this, this is actually speeding up from a tier 1 and tier 2 analyst to give it something a lot more deeper. And I can see right away that the accuracy that I'm about to get here is probably far better than what I can do on my own. And so that's one thing that Copilot can do, is quickly analyze some scripting and give you a little bit more accuracy and a lot more context. So in just seconds, Copilot analyzed the script and it broke it down into easily digestible formatting. And I can see that it downloaded something from the internet, and it suggests that, hey, this script could be potentially harmful. It tells me exactly the file that it downloaded. And in fact, it modified that file to a notepad.exe, which to me, hey, that looks safe, right? So right now it gives me some insight, and now I'm going to queue it onto the next thing. Let me prompt it to give it a little bit more advanced investigation. So I'm going to ask it to surface from the script the relevant pieces of information to investigate in Defender. Now what's nice about this, it's going to go through the results, and it's going to go through the Defender capabilities that I have. And as you can see, it's using natural language. It's putting that KQL into natural language. And Copilot has now broken it down into different elements consistent with the script that I should investigate. So the nice thing about it is that it took that KQL statement and it put it into easy to read language for me. Now I can review the critical information. I can see which workstations, which user accounts that were affected, and I can see an external URL that it interacted with. So I'm going to ask, hey, what is known about this URL? Why is it malicious? Now, what's cool about a prompt like this is that it can actually go out to the plugins that I'm using within Copilot. Now, as you can see here, we have plugins capable of being able to have Copilot leverage. And so, for example, if I'm using Sentinel, if I'm using Microsoft 365 Defender or Intune or Threat Intelligence, all of those features are plugins that I can enable for Copilot for Security to be able to get information from. So it's going to look for that for potential answers. And the nice thing, it gives me a link that I can citate where it got those answers, and I can actually go straight to the source. So what I'll do is I'll click on the Intel profile here to give me a little bit more insight on what is known as this Manatee Tempest issue that's going on. And it's part of this URL called vectorsанdarrows.com. So let me find out a little bit more insight into it. And when I do, it's going to take me right to my Defender portal where I can look at the actual information about this very query, this very exact attack that has been going on to give me more information. So now that I've pinpointed the issue, you know what? I've got a few more options. I'm going to generate a report of this incident. So let me go ahead and write the report or ask Copilot to write the report, I should say. And it's going to do just that. It'll put the report into easy to read language, especially if I want to present this to any of my executive counterparts. I want to make sure that this is something I can present. And, the truth of the matter is that reporting is something everyone will need to do at one point or another, especially in cybersecurity. So the nice thing about this report is that it gave me the information that I need. It gave me the information that I requested, the key points, and things like that. So I'm going to take a pause here because from doing all of these queries and getting the report out and asking it questions, it took a few steps, right? Now, as fast as Copilot was in order to generate the incident report, the summary, the investigation, it did a great job at that. But you know what? We can even do it faster. And the way by doing that is through prompt books. So let's show you how to put together a prompt book to make your lives a lot easier when using Copilot for security. What I'm going to do here, based on that last script that ran, I'm going to generate a new prompt book. First thing is I give it a name. Let's add some tags to it. So I'll go ahead and add, for easier search capabilities, script analysis, TI for threat intelligence, KQL. We'll give it a description. And the next step is the prompt. What I'm going to do, I'm going to actually clear everything out because that was already generated. What I'd like to do is I want to prompt the user who's using this to be able to input their own script that they want to analyze. So we're going to put in the prompt for them to input themselves. And so when they launch it, they're going to be able to actually specify what they want to analyze, and it'll go through the rest of the prompting here. So I think this is there's just a few other things that I might want to look at, but overall, I think this looks pretty good. And, one more thing. I wanted to make sure that when I write the report, that I'm going to target the right people to be able to read the report. So I can actually put in some additional prompting variables where we can say, you know what, I want to write a report for the executive team, and it provides this type of outcome, and I want to format it in, say, like a bulleted fashion. So you can go ahead and you can make those specifications, and you can actually use the prompt book for just me, or you can actually make it available for anyone in the organization. Obviously, that there's some things security-wise that you can configure for that. But the prompt book is saved, and now let's go ahead and view it. So you can see that it looks at the prompts. It has like a bunch of steps that it goes through, and heck, why not? Let's just launch it and see how it works. So here it's asking me what script do I want to put in. I'm going to put in a script called curl-vectors-and-arrows.com. I want executive leadership to be able to read the report. I want to provide recommendations as an output. And if there's any formatting specifications, you don't have to put much in there, but you can summarize it with a description of how you would like it to come out there. So from that standpoint, I'm going to run it. And what's nice is that all of those steps that I did manually and that I had to think about for the next prompt, they're already built into the prompt book. So this accelerates your ability to have some really nice threat analysis, reporting, and a lot of other things that you could do with prompt books. So really good pointers there. Definitely something to look into if you're using Copilot for security. Well, that wraps things up for our webinar series. And before we go, I wanted to remind you that you can take advantage of one of our free security assessments and custom roadmaps by just calling the number that you see there on the screen. You can also email us or visit our website. With this type of consultation, you're going to be able to leverage our experts to look into your security capabilities, identify gaps, and uncover any opportunities for optimization. So feel free to reach out, and it was a pleasure having you attend this webinar. We're going to open things up for questions at this point. If you want to stick around, go ahead, raise your hand, ask a question, or if you want to continue typing with our Q&A, we'll be happy to answer as the time permits in probably the last 8 minutes or so that we have in this hour. Again, thank you all.